Good morning. Welcome to AP Computer Science A. Today we're going to go over section 5.8, static versus instance. So make sure that you have your notes with you. Be sure to have your repo opened up, type in your name, period, and don't forget to click submit once you are done so you can get credit for this assignment. Today we're going to cover static versus instance. Now we started to type in the word static, the keyword static, from the very first day of class. We typed in public, static, void, main, string, bracket, args. And we slowly start to discuss the meaning of each keyword. Public means that we can access it outside the class. We can access the method outside the class. Static, we're going to talk about today. Void means that does not return anything. Main is the name of the method. String, bracket, that is an array of string that we are going to cover on unit 6, the next unit. And args is the variable for the array of string. Now, what does the word static mean? Static means that it's going to belong to the class. There's going to be only one copy of it. And to be able to better understand that, let's go back to our hamburger class that we coded last time. Notice that we have the name of the class. We have instance variables. Instance variables are going to be the opposite of static variables. Instance variables means that they're going to belong to the objects that we're going to create, and more on that in a few minutes. So we'll go over that in a few minutes. We have our constructors. We have our general constructor that's not taking in parameters and makes a patty, a hamburger with one patty, one cheese, and one tomato. We have our hamburger constructor that takes in 3 parameters. We have our mutator methods. Notice that our mutator methods are non-static. They're instance methods that belong to the objects that we're going to create. Our getter methods as well are instance methods. And we know that they're instance methods because they don't have the keyword static. And then we have our toString method and our equal method. So therefore, if it doesn't have the static modifier keyword, there's going to be a instance method or an instance variable. If you go back to our main method, we constructed 2 hamburgers. Our first hamburger with single with no tomato, or second hamburger double with no tomato, and the first one was with tomato, and then we printed them, and we ended up with something like this: 1 1 true, 2 2 false. So let's go back to our Java memory to get a better illustration of what's happening. So first, on line 19, we declare our variable h1, and then we call a constructor to create an object. We created a hamburger that was 1 patty, 1 cheese with tomato. So that's going to represent the hamburger here. Then on line 20, we declare our variable h2, and then we call a constructor to construct a object of a hamburger, 2 patties, 2 cheese, and no tomato. And I said no tomato, so let's take the tomato away. So notice that each of them have their own patty, their own cheese, and their own tomato variable with different values. So H2 has patty that has a value of 2. In patty, H1 has patty that has a value of 1. So that's what it means with instance variable, that there are copies of each of the variables that belong to the object themselves. Whenever we have a static variable, That means that it's going to belong only to the class and there's going to be only one copy. But before we start, let's look at our instance methods that we have. We have our mutator methods or setter methods and our getter methods. And let's go and look at the get patty. We are going to return an integer and we return patty, but let's go and also print a statement. Let's go and say system.out.println and say this hamburger has patty, which is the instance variable patties. And let's call, before we actually print, we're just going to be calling our instance method. Remember that there's no modifier keyword static in here. So therefore, this is an instance method that belongs to the objects. So in order to be able to use the instance, if we want to be able to use that instance variable, I cannot use the name of the class and say get patty, because it's going to say, well, get patty, but do I need to get the number of patties for this one or this one? It doesn't know. So therefore, if I run it, you're going to get an error. And it says, error, non-static method, get patty, cannot hamburger. So therefore, this is an instance method. So we have to use, this is a non-static method. We have to use the name of the object, either h1, so we can say this hamburger has 1 patties. Or if we use h2, because it's a non-static method or an instance method, that means that we are calling this method that's going to return this hamburger has 2 patties. So now let's go and create a static method right above. Actually, let's go and do it right above the in line number 40. We're going to say public. It's going to be a static method. That means that's going to belong to the class and not to the objects. There's going to be only one copy. And we're going to say, we're not going to return anything. We're just going to print a statement. And this is a static, we're going to call it a static method. It doesn't take any parameters. And our only job will be system.out.println. And we're going to say, this is a static method. So now, if we go back to the main method, and we call the method, which is called static method, and we run it, it should say this is a static method. So therefore, when we create static methods, we must call them using the name of the class. Now, some of you might say, well, what if I use h1? What if I use the name of the object to call a static method that's in the class only? Well, that's also going to work fine, because whenever you create an object, you actually create a copy of the entire class and create separate instance variables for each one. You are able to call static methods by using the name of the objects. But our preference is to use the name of the class instead. Now, let's look at static variables. So let's go and get rid of this. let's go and go into our hamburger class. Let's go and create a static variable. And what we're going to create an order number. So let's assume that every person is going to order one burger, and we're going to give each of them a order number. So we're going to say it's going to be private because we want them to change it. We want to be able to have control over the variables. Then it's going to be a static, means that there's going to be only one copy. There's going to be an int, and we're just going to say num. And we want to be able to initialize it. If we don't initialize it here, it's going to be initialized to 0. Let's assume that we want our first order to be 1,000. So we want it to be 1,000. Then we can, every time we create a hamburger, we want to increase the order number. But we also want to give each of the hamburgers the order number so they can keep it. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a static variable, but we're also going to create an instance variable, private int. We don't need the word static because they're going to be an instance variable. That means that they're going to belong to the objects themselves. Order. So what we need to be careful with is that we first want to be able to increase our number or instance static variable by 1, and then we're going to assign it to the order number. So therefore, we want to make sure that we increase our number by 1. So our first number will be 1,001, and then we are going to assign the num to order. So therefore, this variable will be increased by 1, which will be 1,001, and therefore our first order will be 1,001. But let me actually go back and create a static variable, which will be 1,000. That'll be on line 10. Then whenever we construct our first burger, which is here, we are going to increase the num or static variable by 1. So it'll be 1,001. And then we're going to assign it to the order. Once we create the object, it'll be 1,001. Next, when we construct our next burger, because our class knows where is the last number, therefore we're going to increase it by 1, which is 1,002, and then we need to assign it to the instance variable, which is 1,002. Now let's go and change our toString and add our order number to the toString. So we're going to go over to line 74, and I'm going to say order number plus or order plus, and let me go and place a cap. Go back. And therefore, whenever I print, it should say the order number for each of the burgers, which is 1,001. And actually, I just want the order number. I don't want the word. So it might look a little nicer. So what happened here? Why is our second hamburger 0? So if we go back to it works for the first one, right? But what happened to the second one? Notice that in this case, our first burger was built by using the first constructor. Our second burger was built by using our second constructor. So we have a choice. We can just copy and paste here, which should work. And now it should be updated just like we have it here, correct? But notice that this code is a little repetitive. So what we want to do, we want to clean it up a little bit and use the this keyword to be able to call the other constructor from here. So therefore, we're going to use the keyword this, and we're going to say in the parameters, 1 patty, 1 cheese, and we want it with tomatoes. And therefore, I can just let the second parameter do all the work. And this should be exactly the same as before, correct? And this is a little more efficient. So just in case I need to be able to make changes, I can just make changes in one place rather than having to keep track of how many constructors I have and how many times I need to make those changes. So let's assume that we are going to create a third hamburger. So let's go ahead and say we're going to create a third hamburger, H3 is equal to new hamburger, and we are going to create a single with tomato. And I can print it afterwards. And I can just get rid of this one. So therefore, now you have 3 burgers, and it should be, the order should be 1003. Now, you know that you have the coded correctly if you can actually print out another time. If I can print out the second hamburger, and if I print out the second hamburger, then it should give me 1002 for the order number. And it does. So therefore, what is the difference between static and non-static or instance? Static means that there's only one copy that's been stored in the class. Non-static or instance, that means that each of the objects are going to get their own copy, and they are able to have different values. With static variables, you can only have one copy, and if you change the value, for in this case, we increase it by 1, so therefore it's 1003. When we created the object, H3, we created the hamburger with tomato, and we created the actual hamburger. So now we have 3 instance variables, 3 objects that have different instance variables, and each of the values for them can be different. Where whenever you have a static variable, that belongs to the class, and there's only one copy. So that will conclude the lesson for today. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.